Welcome, curious minds. You've handed us a fascinating collection of sources today, and our mission for this deep dive really is to take you back, way back, 9,000 years to West Africa. We're going to try and piece together a vivid picture of these ancient toolmakers, their really sophisticated skills, and the world they lived in. And it's all thanks to this single exceptionally preserved archaeological site in Senegal. It's a discovery that's genuinely reshaping how we see this huge, often overlooked region. Okay, so let's start by unpacking a big challenge. It's highlighted right in our sources, like the detailed findings in PLOS1. West Africa's prehistoric past, especially its last hunter-gatherers, it's surprisingly poorly documented. And we're talking about a massive area here, like 6 million square kilometers. That's, more than 10 times the size of France?
Yeah, it's vast. And what's fascinating here is why it's remained such a mystery, especially compared to, say, Europe or Asia, where we have quite detailed studies of ancient populations. West Africa, it faces unique hurdles, climatic factors, geological ones too, like intense erosion, soil disturbance. They just haven't been kind to preserving stratified remains. And stratification for archaeologists is absolutely crucial. I mean, it's like a timeline etched into the earth, right? Each layer captures a different phase of occupation, tells us about lifestyle changes, shifts in the environment over thousands of years. Without that clear layering, the past often looks, jumbled, confusing.
And that's exactly where this central discovery comes in, creating a real aha moment for the researchers, I imagine. In 2017, the Ravin Blanc X site, RBX they call it, discovered in Senegal's Falémé Valley by this multidisciplinary team from Geneva.
Exactly, RBX. And it's a true gem. It's exceptionally well preserved, which is amazing considering its size. It's tiny, just 25 square meters. But it features this deep, undisturbed layer that gives us a rare, really clear snapshot of the early Holocene. That's over 9,000 years ago. And this period is particularly interesting because it came right after nearly 10,000 years of really severe drought in the region. So it marks this pivotal environmental shift. Finding a site like RBX in West Africa, it's honestly like stumbling upon a perfectly preserved time capsule in a landscape where most of the historical evidence has just been eroded away. It's an invaluable window, really.
So you might be sitting there thinking, okay, why should I care about one small archaeological site in Senegal? Well, the thing is, this discovery, it fills a critical gap in our knowledge of human history, a really big one. It gives us unprecedented insights into communities we knew very, very little about before. It's a huge step forward in understanding human adaptation, technological innovation, and cultural diversity across a whole continent that's often been kind of sidelined in global prehistory.
Okay, so let's step into this ancient world. What did this team, with people from Switzerland, Senegal, France, Germany, what did they actually find at Ravin Blanc X?
They uncovered a 9,000-year-old quartz snapping workshop, and it was associated with a fireplace.
A workshop, so not like finished arrowheads lying around. No, not really. I mean, the finished tools. The hunter-gatherers would probably have taken those with them when they moved on. Instead, Charlotte Prouvost, who led the study, her team found something arguably even more informative. A huge pile of production waste. Imagine patiently piecing together thousands of tiny flakes and cores, all the debris left over from making stone tools like this incredibly complex jigsaw puzzle that hadn't been touched for millennia. And doing that allowed them to meticulously reconstruct the precise stone knapping techniques they used, the criteria they had for selecting high-quality quartz, and even gauge the skill level of these ancient knappers.
Okay, now diving into the craft itself, what was it about the material and the techniques that really stood out to the researchers?
Well, two things mainly. First, the raw material choice. These people almost exclusively used high-quality, very homogeneous quartz. And they collected it directly from primary vein outcrops, like right from the rock veins in the ground, not just grabbing scattered pebbles from a riverbed. So this wasn't just convenience. It suggests a very deliberate, meticulous selection process. They knew what they wanted based on the quality needed for specific planned tools.
Right, they were picky.
Yeah.
And the technique.
Indeed. The technique was primarily direct freehand percussion, most likely striking the quartz with a hard mineral hammer like another stone. But what truly stands out, the really significant thing, is their investment in producing standardized blanks right from the get-go, right at the extraction stage. This minimized the need for lots of extensive retouching later on. So what this means is they weren't just shipping away randomly. They were intentionally creating these preformed pieces designed for a specific end use, very efficient. And they seem to have focused on just two main types of these blank products. One was relatively wide and thick with straight parallel edges. You can think of it like a versatile pre-cut base. And the other type was elongated, narrow, and thinner. And these frequently had what's called an oblique distal termination. Basically, it means it was already shaped with a natural asymmetric point.
Wow, so they're making standardized forms, almost like, I don't know, interchangeable parts?
Yeah.
That's incredible. So what does that tell us about the site itself? Was this like their main home base or something more specialized?
Yeah, you've hit on a crucial point there. The evidence points very strongly towards a single, brief, and highly specialized occupation episode, very different from a long-term general camp. The workshop area is spatially restricted. There's that small zone. It's overflowing with manufacturing waste, the debitage. But very few finished tools, or even tools that were heavily retouched, were found right there. Plus, the radiocarbon dates they got from the fireplace charcoal were remarkably consistent, tight cluster of dates. And the anthropological analyses, that's the study of the charcoal itself, showed a uniformity of wood species used in the fire. All of that supports this idea of a short-term, very specific activity.
Okay.
It strongly indicates that those perfectly crafted, standardized blanks, they were most likely transported away, taken somewhere else for final use, maybe at a hunting camp or a different settlement.
Makes sense. But it's not just about the tools, is it? It's also about the world these people lived in. How do we know what the environment was like 9,000 years ago in this part of Senegal?
Right, and this is where that multidisciplinary approach really, really shines. You had specialists analyzing the charcoal from the fireplace, identifying the wood species used for fire. For example, they found Deuterium spp, which is a type of tree that typically thrives in more humid savanna environments. Then you had geomorphologists, sedimentologists, paleoenvironmentalists studying the soils, the sediments, and crucially, the plant silica remains to reconstruct the broader climate and landscape picture.
Plant silica remains. Right. And what did those microscopic bits tell us specifically about the conditions?
They painted a pretty clear picture. An open savanna landscape dotted with trees, shrubs, palms, and importantly, a dense grass cover. Crucially, the phytoliths they analyzed from layer 2, that's the early Holocene layer where the workshop was found, reflected significantly more humid conditions. This coincides perfectly with the onset of what scientists call the African humid period, a much wetter time. And this stands in stark contrast to the deeper, older layer 1, which dated back to the Pleistocene. That layer showed characteristics of much drier, more arid conditions. And if you connect this back, the excellent preservation of the RBX site itself is probably partly because of this dense vegetation cover during the early Holocene. It would have helped protect the sediments from erosion. And as I mentioned, the deuterium charcoal also strongly supports this idea of a more humid savanna-type environment during that period.
Okay, so we have this incredibly detailed snapshot from RBX, the tools, the techniques, the environment. What does this all mean for the wider story of the later Stone Age, the LSA, in West Africa? Where does Ravin Blanc X actually fit into this broader historical tapestry?
That's the big question, isn't it? How does RBX1 compare to other LSA sites? Well, when we look just within its immediate neighborhood, the Falémé Valley, we see some intriguing differences. Older sites, like Tumbura-San and Ravin de Sansande, which date back to the late Pleistocene, they show a different approach entirely. Those groups used river pebbles mostly and employed more opportunistic knapping strategies, basically making the most of whatever flake came off the core stone. And they produced what archaeologists call geometric microliths, those tiny, precisely shaped stone tools, often triangular or crescent-shaped. But, and this is key, these required heavy retouching, lots of extra work, secondary flaking to get them into their final desired form.
Right, so a completely different philosophy of tool making compared to the hyper-planned precision we saw at RBX1. So how does RBX then connect to other sites in the region?
It is a sharp contrast, yeah. But RBX1 also shares some really intriguing similarities with another site in the Falémé Valley called Fatandi-V. Fatandi-V is roughly contemporary, dating somewhere between about 12,800 and 10,300 years ago, so overlapping in time. And guess what? Fatandi-V also featured a specialized knapping workshop, used a single raw material collected from primary sources, and focused on the systematic production of standardized blanks with minimal retouch.
Oh, interesting.
Very interesting. It leads the researchers to a working hypothesis. Maybe RBX1 and Fatandi-V represent a distinct phase, or maybe a distinct tradition, of LSA occupation in the Falémé Valley. A specific regional expression, what archaeologists sometimes call a facies, broadly associated with that Pleistocene to Holocene transition period, reflecting shifts in how they got resources and what their production goals were, specifically tailored for the Sahelo-Sudanine region, perhaps.
Okay, so a regional pattern possibly emerging there. But what about further afield, like the tropical forest regions of West Africa? Were they doing similar things down there?
No, actually. Quite different, based on the evidence we have. Sites like Shimlaka and Njuinye in Cameroon or Iho-Elaru over Nigeria. These also show microlithic traditions, and they predominantly use quartz too. But they often exhibit a much lower degree of blank standardization. Their knapping seems to have been more sort of flake-oriented initially, and then those flakes were heavily retouched, meaning lots of secondary shaping to create a really diverse toolkit. Geometric microliths, yes, but also scrapers, other kinds of tools. So it's a stark difference from RBX1's emphasis on producing these precise, standardized blanks that needed only marginal modification, if any, at the production site.
Right.
It suggests the RBX1 knappers were really planning ahead, aiming for efficiency and consistency right from the start, whereas maybe the forest groups were adapting flakes more opportunistically to fit a wider range of immediate needs.
It's also worth noting, isn't it, that RBX1 is aceramic. No pottery found there. But interestingly, the earliest ceramics we know about in West Africa actually predate RBX1. How do we square that circle?
Yeah, that's a critical point for understanding the whole regional context. You're right. In Mali, for instance, in the Umjugo complex, ceramics appeared as early as the 10th millennium calibrated BC, so earlier than RBX. And what's more, there's another site called Damatuma 1. It's contemporary with RBX1, dating around 9,000 to 9,000 years ago. And Damatuma 1 was also a specialized knapping workshop focusing on standardized rectilinear flakes, but it also yielded no ceramics. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean the people who used Damatuma 1, or RBX1 for that matter, didn't know about or use pottery elsewhere, just that they weren't making or using it at that specific location.
Ah, okay. So it's plausible then that these knappers at Ravin Blanc X were part of a larger cultural group that did use pottery, but this particular site was just for knapping. It really highlights how specific site functions can be within a broader culture.
Absolutely. It's a very plausible hypothesis. You see the distinct functions of sites like Damatuma 1 and the nearby Ravandu Hibu, which did have ceramics from the same period. It suggests different sites serve different purposes within the same cultural sphere. And this could easily be the case for RBX1 as well. It was a specialized manufacturing hub, not a general living site where you might expect pottery. The big gap in time, about 6,000 years between RBX1's LSA layer and the later Neolithic layer found above it in the Falémé Valley, well, that means we can't draw direct local connections about the transition to farming and pottery within this single site, but it definitely adds to the complexity of the regional picture, suggesting cultural evolution wasn't necessarily a simple linear process everywhere.
Wow. What an incredible deep dive into this small but clearly hugely significant archaeological window. The Ravin Blanc X site in Senegal has really filled a critical gap, hasn't it, in our understanding of West African prehistory, giving us this rare, super detailed look at the technocultural traditions of hunter-gatherers during the early Holocene.
It absolutely has. It shows us that while, yes, there was a general trend towards microlithization, making these small stone tools across West Africa, the specific strategies people used were incredibly diverse. The sophisticated blank standardization we see at RBX1 and its similarities to sites like Fatandi V and maybe Dematumo, it really suggests distinct regional facies, unique cultural expressions within this broader later Stone Age complex.
Ultimately, what this deep dive reveals is a picture of dynamic, really adaptable human groups navigating these huge climatic and environmental changes, and employing highly specialized skills and strategies to thrive in a region we're only just beginning to truly understand. And that, I suppose, opens up a whole new set of questions.
Indeed. It really leaves us with a provocative thought, doesn't it? If such a tiny, well-preserved site can reveal such a high level of specialized skill, such cultural complexity, what other hidden pockets of ingenuity and, frankly, untold stories are still waiting out there, waiting to be unearthed in the vast, still largely underexplored landscapes of West Africa? And maybe even more intriguingly, what incredible specialized tools were these perfectly crafted blanks ultimately used for if they weren't being heavily retouched at the site where they were made? Where did they go? What did they become?
Lots to think about. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and please join us next time for another deep dive into the sources that shape our world.